So what I see, what most companies do, and almost all companies actually do that, especially also US companies going into the German market, but also most French companies going into the German market, they just copy and paste their playbooks. So that basically means just translating them, not even paying attention to cultural differences. And of course, we all somehow know already that it doesn't work, but somehow we're still surprised that it doesn't work after we've seen the results.
So, welcome, Tim, to the Go to Germany podcast, our podcast where we talk about how to launch the German market and also how to build a brand in the German market. I'm really, really happy to have you on my podcast today. For everyone who doesn't know Tim, I have known him for a couple of years now. And I can say that he's the founder of Yoyaba, which is the leading B2B tech SaaS growth agency in the German market. And we have had many discussions about how to launch a brand in the German market and how to speed up your growth and also your branding in the German market. So I'm really happy to have you. Tim, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. You know, I love podcasts, so I'm always excited to talking about tech stuff, marketing stuff. Also for this conversation, very excited to diving into this with you.
Yeah. So, I told you I was a little intimidated because you have your own podcast also, which is very successful, the Revenue Marketing Podcast. And I really recommend everyone to listen into this podcast because it gives a lot of insights and I've shared it a lot with our clients or prospects already. So I hope I'm going to be up to the task, but I think it's going to be okay. So, Tim, please present yourself a little bit. Tell us what you do at Yoyaba, and then we dive into the topic of today.
Yeah, sure. So almost 5 years ago, I actually co-founded Yoyaba together with my dad, which already in itself is probably kind of a crazy story, I would say. At least that's what most people tell me. And we basically started as a kind of a basic online marketing agency that then quickly transitioned into a highly specialized boutique agency for B2B SaaS and tech companies, taking care of all the different growth activities, such as, of course, demand generation, mostly on paid channels, but also organic growth, which is becoming more and more popular actually, because it's very efficient. So going deep into thought leadership content on kind of optimizing the inbound buying experience and basically taking care of all the initiatives that drive pipeline and revenue through inbound demand, so to speak, if that makes sense. And we call that revenue marketing.
Yes. So the challenge that we have when we talk to brands that want to launch the German market, and you're a real expert. I know you also do international campaigns, but you're a real expert for the German market. So, and you have worked with French and international brands also launching in the German market. So, what is always a challenge for us is to explain to our clients or to our ecosystem how to approach the German market and what are the critical steps you have to take to really launch a brand. So when we talk about scale-ups, then normally they already have a brand in their home market. They already exist. They have clients. They have a product. So it's not a small startup trying to, get a little bit of traction. But normally they want to go big in Germany quickly. What are the first, let's say, advice or how do you onboard those kind of clients? What is really the critical points that they need to do in the very beginning to be able to have something that they can scale then in the German market?
Yeah. So I'm assuming that all the research and the decision on a specific market has been done before, because of course the due diligence on a market should always be step number one. And after that, I like to call the further steps the 3 M's. So for me, that's mindset, then market differences, and then third one is mechanics. And I think also it's very important to put them into that specific order, because the mindset on how you approach a market is crucial. Because for me, it's it's kind of it's an evolution of your whole strategy and not a quick tactic. And to understand that on its core level, I think is very essential, because in your original market, when you were building, for example, your product and your audience and your customers in France, you wouldn't be just kind of throwing budget on all different activities, but you would act and do it like a real startup. You know, you would build bridges between the different steps and also do different things when you raise your seed round, your Series A, Series B, etc. And maybe you're now past Series B and you want to internationalize more, but that doesn't mean that you should kind of use the same methods that you and tactics you do now in France, also kind of copy and clone them towards Germany, but you should rather start how you would have behaved in your seed round in France now with the same mindset in Germany, for example. And I think it's highly important to, when you internationalize, to be that startup in its early stages once again, and not the scale up that you're in your home country. And I think understanding this, that it's really a strategy kind of focus and not a quick tactic, is highly important to start with.
The first step that you said, which is interesting, and maybe we can just come back to it a little bit, because this is the preparation for the mindset, is the analysis of the market and really understanding the ICPs, the customers, the needs that they have. This is something that I think is really very crucial too. So you said, okay, it's a prerequisite when they come to you, or maybe this is also something that you can do for your clients. Do you have any advice on how to do that very thoroughly? Because of course we know, and this is also based on research and all of our experience, a German client doesn't buy any product, service, or software as a French customer, for example. We have different decision cycles. We have longer decision cycles. We need different kind of information. So what would be your advice to really do this research, and how deeply should it be?
Yeah. So I think the research is part of the second M then, which is market differences, which goes very deep into the research, as you say, and I fully agree how important it is. Because if you have the mindset that you're a startup now, once again, what do you do when you're a startup in your home country? Well, you go very deep into your ICP analysis, and you understand that you don't have product market fit yet when you're a seed startup, right? And that you should also understand when you go into a new country. You should assume that you don't have product market fit yet. And then you take all the steps that you also did before in your home country, so that you can be certain that you have product market fit in your new the country that you expand into. So to understand the market difference, I think it's important to split into legal and cultural. First and foremost, I think legal is quite obvious. Here in Germany, we have the GDPR, which basically regulates how you handle a prospect's data. And then we have the PECD, which regulates how you kind of reach out to a prospect, right? And I'm sure there's similar laws in France, but I think it's important to really have a look at them and check in with your lawyer before you actually take any action. And that box you can probably check off quite quickly. The cultural part, of course, is a little bit more tricky, and you probably need to do more research, talk with more people and potential customers, and it will take more time. I think all the steps you've done before for your home country, you should also do for the new country. You should look at all the competitors that exist in that market. You should look at their communication, how they kind of go into the market, and how you kind of. So it's basically for the strategy questions, I like to think in two questions. It's where do we play, right? So now you have a new playing field with that new country. And new playing fields have new rules. So you need to look at how does that market really work? And then the second question is, how do we win, right? So, and answering how you win is basically kind of analyzing all the things that other companies do, and then kind of picking your kind of game plan or playbook that will define how you win in that market. And I think all the work you've done in order to reach product market fit and a level in your home country that have kind of given you the opportunity to even internationalize, you should do all the work again for the new country.
I think maybe you will talk about it when you talk about the mechanics, but because I think what's interesting is also that sometimes people are less patient with the new market because, they say, okay, we have
Word.
I
think you should
succeeded.
repeat that sentence one more time.
You need
It's so
to be
true.
more patient.
Yeah.
Because of course you think, okay, we figured it out. We have found product market fit in our home market, and we know how it works. We know our customers. We know our ICP. We know all of the unique selling points and everything. And so they're less, and they forget that it took them months and years to build that information. And I think it's a good basic information that you can build on when you go in another markets, and you can set up hypothesis of what should work, what worked at home, what could work. But then you have to take the time and test everything again. And sometimes we see companies that start campaigns or ads or those kind of initiatives, and they get upset very quickly because it doesn't work. So maybe you can tell us how this testing mechanism, A/B testing, and also testing different messages, testing different USPs, different ICPs, is also part of what you do. Because I think this is something where people get, I see people sometimes, or companies stopping campaigns after 2 or 3 months and said, okay, we don't have the right KPIs. It's not working. We have to stop. We have to do something differently.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we talk about the mechanics, we can kind of check the box that we have kind of done the legal work, right? So we have set the legal foundations. And as you said before, I think then it's important to dive into our ICP very, very deeply. So we need to define our ICP one more time. We can't just copy paste the same ICP. We need to define it for the new market. And that also means that we need to select new use cases, because of course, for German countries, very different use cases are relevant than there are for French companies. So we need to pick the relevant ones. And of course, I think the best case would be that before you enter a new market, you already have some customers in that country and you already have some success stories. Because if you don't have that, you will have a pretty hard time. So I think that should be your very first goal, to win your first customers, make them successful, and then also create really, really compelling, well thought through, detail-oriented case studies, because Germans like to go very deep also in understanding the cases, and they read everything, especially if you're not a German company, because you need to show that that they can trust you. So the more detail you can add to the success stories and case studies, the better. And then you need to also, of course, define new KPIs. So and I think that will go in stages, because the KPIs you look at within your first quarter will be different than after your fourth quarter in a new market. So it should be kind of an evolution of your KPIs. So to say, I think in the first quarter, it would not be the best idea to measure your success in net new ARR, for example. Right? I think we can all agree on that. But maybe after the fourth quarter, I think it should be quite relevant to measure success on ARR. And that you have to define with your leadership team. What are the different stages of the North Star metric, so to speak, of how we will measure success in a new country? And once we've done that, I think it's highly important to approach your creative strategy. And by creative strategy, I mean, start from the bottom once again. You've done your research now. You know the pain points in the market. You know what competitors do. You know how you will win in that market. And now it's important to craft a creative strategy that is only relevant for that specific market. So what I see, what most companies do, and almost all companies actually do that, especially also US companies going into the German market, but also most French companies going into the German market, they just copy and paste their playbooks. So that basically means just translating them not even paying attention to cultural differences. And of course, we all somehow know already that it doesn't work, but somehow we're still surprised that it doesn't work after we've seen the results. And it's a completely different story if you're taking something that exists already and you translate it versus creating something new from scratch with your new research. And I think that's very important that you go very deep into that. So when you've created your first campaign for your home country, you also created a creative strategy. So you've done your research, you've selected the pain points, you've crafted your messaging. Basically, what is the story that we want to tell? Some people also, and I also like to call it strategic narrative. What's our narrative for our product and for our customers and everything in between?
Amen.
Yeah. And how
can
can
say.
we and how can we distribute our story not only through all our different go-to-market departments, such as marketing, sales, customer success, everybody needs to be on board, but also through all different channels. So that's events, but also all the digital channels. So probably LinkedIn, Meta, Google, your website. If you don't have a localized landing page, I think at least you should have a landing page in German, for example. You don't need to have, I think you don't need to have your whole website in German in order to go into the market, because that's a crazy lot of work to do first kind of tests. But I think you should have at least one landing page that all of your campaigns can kind of lead into, so that you actually show, hey, well, at least we're trying and we're making an effort to provide you in your native language and to understand you better.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So you said in the beginning, and it's interesting because it's also a question of the size of the company and the resources that they have at their disposal. So you mostly work with scale ups, so companies that really also have the firepower to do those kind of things. Very often, what we see in the practical world is that they do not have customers in Germany yet. I know how important social proof is in Germany, and that you need logos that you can recognize, that Germans can recognize, big logos that are known. So let's say you have international clients. I don't know, it could be Air France or Allianz or those kind of companies that you already have that you can use. But to really understand and find German customers, if we talk about the German Mittelstand also, so the SMB companies in Germany, how do you, what kind of channels would you, let's say, advise companies to use in the beginning? Because I have such a big portfolio of things that I can do, from events to social media to ads to newsletter to whatever, webinars and all of those kind of things. So how would you build it up from the beginning? Let's say I want to start my scale up in January 2025 in Germany. What would be a little bit the sequencing to be able to build it up in the right with the right resources also?
It's a great question. And that's exactly what you should think about after you've done your creative strategy. You know your story and you've selected the channels. So that's particularly relevant for the German market, to warm up the market before you go heavy into sales mode. Because if German people have never heard about you ever before and you outreach them, I think your chances of success are very minimal. It's much better if you provide value first without having the intention of winning customers right away. So that means maybe creating a webinar, maybe creating even a local podcast, maybe even kind of picking subject matter experts within your country, company, that will post in the German language very regularly on LinkedIn, for example. So really kind of creating that demand, providing that value at scale through different materials and assets. And I think what works great here, and that's a kind of something we've also done with, for example, so we've done the go-to-market for PlayPlay and PayFit. And what we've done there also is that we co-hosted webinars with brands that are already very popular and relevant in the market. And there's always different also SaaS companies, but maybe sometimes even service providers or agencies that kind of complement your product really, really well. So if you can pick them and ask them to do a co-hosted webinar, for example, you will appear next to the brand that's already known to German people. So that already gives you an advantage in terms of trust. And not only that, I think another step that's highly relevant, and Payfit Payfit is in the HR space, and in HR there's a lot of business creators, B2B influencers, thought leaders, however you want to call them, that have a lot of reach and have a huge audience, especially on LinkedIn. And I think what makes a lot of sense is if you cooperate with them for a set period of time. So not just for one promo post, because that doesn't really work, but kind of use them as brand ambassadors almost. So you go into an agreement for like maybe 6 months, if that's or maybe 12 months, if that's the time that you want to prove your success of your go-to-market. And then do different events with them. So do webinars, so they should write LinkedIn posts. Maybe they can also be featured on your website. Maybe they can give you a quote. Maybe they can even use your product and show how the product is inserted into their own workflow, etc. Because thought leaders nowadays, I think they have so much attention and are so underpriced because so few B2B companies actually use them. It's kind of like a gold mine still. It's like the early days of when first influencers were used for B2C in e-commerce. That's how we're in B2B. And I think there's a huge advantage if you kind of do a webinar in Germany with a German thought leader in your vertical, in your industry, and they will invite their audience into the webinar. You will have a lot of trust, and you also have great content that you can record and then distribute on all other channels and use also in your campaigns, because of course it's part of your strategic narrative and your story, because you've picked also the theme of the event, for example. And I think that will give you a great way to warm up the market, to only focus on demand creation, to create net new demand in a new market for a couple of months, and only then focus on capturing the demand that you've created already, because you will have a much higher level of trust.
Okay, so now if I look at the classical playbook of a scale-up wanting to go to the German market, the question is now, mostly what we see is that, because I agree with you, if not, I wouldn't have you on the podcast, because I think it's really the right way to do it. But what we see in reality very often, and it would be interesting on how you convince your clients and maybe also help your clients convince their boards and also their investors, basically to invest in warming up the market without having, revenue goals from, let's say, months. Sometimes we see it months 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, because basically what you say is that you can go 6 months, 9 months, maybe 12 months, depending on your product, depending on the sales cycle that you have, without doing any revenue. So the idea is, how can we get people to understand that this warming up of the market is so important? And then because what we see is that people go in and then they do outreach, they do LinkedIn, they do cold emailing, they do phoning, they do all of those things where they think that they can close a deal very quickly, and they want to have the low hanging fruits and the quick wins and all of those things. And basically what they should do is what you just said, warm up the market and then try to build on that. But it's the other way around. And this is also what sometimes even the board and the investors don't really understand, because if you go in B2B SaaS and you say you want to work with influencers, they're going to say, no, what we want is revenue. We want customers, we want lead gen, pipeline, everything. So how do you convince people that this is the right way to go? And how can you help them convince, be the internal heroes to defend this kind of strategy when we talk about country managers or marketing managers?
Yeah. I think it's a really tough challenge, because I've experienced so many times exactly this conversation, and it applies to so many different things also. But I think a great way is to, of course, also bring external experts who've seen it so many times into the conversation. Someone like yourself, you've seen it so many times how it should be done. And if you've been brought into the conversation, you can bring the relevant arguments that actually then make sense, so you can actually execute like that. But on the other side, I think at the end of the day, you will be needed to find kind of a compromise, so that you can go kind of, yes, you need to capture demand and you need to show success, but also then you need to be able to warm up the market. And I think it all comes down to aligning on a mindset, right? So what's the mindset that we have when we go into the market now? How can we establish shared beliefs that will align us on also the success then? And when you have the mindset, then you can define KPIs. And I think we've talked about this earlier on this podcast, that you not pick, for example, new won logos for the first month, for example, as your North Star metric, but rather you pick, for example, engaged accounts or something like this, and then you can really work your way through, and the KPIs you will pick, they will make all the difference, to be honest. Because if you pick engaged accounts and then maybe the next stage is maybe you see a brand uplift in the country, from Google searches, that would make sense. Or maybe even you will see an increase in company followers on LinkedIn from German people and accounts from your ICP in that country, etc. So that you can really work your way through in a way that it makes sense, and that will also support your initiative and your tactic of warming up the market first before capturing it.
So,
And
so maybe
and if you
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, if you really make that, if you present it in a way that it's completely logical, you bring someone in like yourself that has seen it many times and can support this kind of way of working, then I think also investors will agree that it makes most sense to do this. And also show them the threats. If you go, especially in Germany, heavily into sales mode of like needing to win clients in the first week, your brand will be highly damaged. And I think that's a huge threat. Also, if you want to see this as a long-term play, and it should be a strategic long-term play, not a quick tactic, as we've discussed at the beginning.
Yeah. So I think when we go back to the mindset, what is interesting that I think that the first step of the mindset would basically be, how do I prepare this project and prepare everyone who is part of this project, even before you pitch it to your investors, or even before you pitch it to your board, is to basically build up the international project with this mindset in mind, if you can say it like this, is that you say, okay, what we are looking for is building up and growing a market on the long term. Even though we have some short-term metrics, but then you have to define short-term. Short-term for a startup can also be 9 months or 12 months to have some, really strong KPIs like sales, for example. But to really have this in mind before you start crafting the project is to say, how are we gonna craft this whole project together, and what kind of mindset do we have to have from the beginning of building it up. This is why we also, because as I said, mostly the KPI that we see for the international project is sales, pipeline. And so we say, okay, you need to get other KPIs into the discussion in knowing the market, talking to the client, talking to the prospect, having partners, building up a network, all of those kind of things, understanding the culture, understanding ICP. All of those are also really strong KPIs that you have, at least for the first 6 to 12 months, that you need to that you need to get in. And this is why I think the earlier you build up, this is what we call a little bit international by design, because this is the earlier you build up this kind of mindset into your company and into your investors, and you start pitching the story from the very beginning, the easier it will be to convince them to do what you just said, and to build a common belief on how we should start this project.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you need to be building new structures, right? It can also be considered a complete phase shift in your company kind of journey of building your startup. And for every phase shift, of course, you need to prepare months, if not years in advance. So I fully agree with you. The earlier you start, the better.
Yeah. And maybe when we think about, because I know that you have been to an event in the US and we talked a little bit about this, how to create, the different approaches on branding and communication that we can see, because we're in the SaaS field, right? We talk about tech, so there's a lot of, American communication, of course, that we see every day. What do you think is the and then we said, okay, is there maybe an American way to communicate and a European way of doing branding and those kind of things? What do you think is really crucial to build a European brand? So not to have like a French startup that also has activities in other markets, but to say, okay, I'm a European company and I have a European branding.
Yeah. So I think first it's important to define what's what's branding, and for me it's how people in your market talk behind your back when you're not in the room, pretty much, and that is defined by every single interaction that they have with your company, right? So I think it's better to look at like what kind of way of doing business is really relevant, and it's what people look for in that new market that we should talk about first, and then we can see of how we can actually adapt that within our company for that specific market that will be, of course, executed by different people than for other markets, of course. And something that quickly comes to mind is, especially you've talked about the German Mittelstand before, is to really keep it formal. They they don't want to be talked to in this startup-y slang language that we like to talk in the tech space here. They want to be respected. They want to start formal into a conversation. And if you decide after the third, fourth, or fifth call that you want to make it a little bit more informal, then that's completely fine if you have that consent. So I think that's highly relevant. The next one is, and I think that's very typical for Germans, to keep it really task oriented when you're in a conversation, because we're Germans, we're all about efficiency. So don't do too much, like small talk at the beginning, but like start into be kind of structured, be well prepared, be task oriented, get the task done. If there's time at the end for some other chatter, that's completely fine. But you need to be efficient in your way of business, and also in your follow-ups, for example. If you promise to follow up same day or next day, you need to do that. If you don't, you've lost that trust. And that also comes to the next point, which is reliability. Not only with your follow-up, but also just be on time. I know, especially in the US, people don't value that as much as German people, but for German people, it's really important. If you're 5 minutes late, it's considered as highly disrespectful. So I think that's a crucial crucial thing. And then also just doing what you said you were going to do. That's how you win the trust. And then, of course, I think now when I think about it, I think Germans kind of prefer written over spoken communication a little bit more. So especially, I mean, it's fine to have a call, especially when scheduled, of course, and also to be spontaneously called sometimes. But there should always also be written communication where everything is like documented in an official kind of way.
In
Not
German?
only in German, yes, via email. Not only on LinkedIn or Slack, which is kind of an unofficial channel, but like on email. I think that's important. And then I think it's important to, especially in a professional context, really treat business first and then private second, if at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's important to
that's
keep
a big
in mind.
difference between. That's interesting because in France, for example, what can happen to you is that you meet a business acquaintance the first time over lunch. which is something that does not so much happen in Germany. Is, you
Yeah.
meet someone, I don't know, on LinkedIn, you say, okay, let's have a coffee, let's go for lunch, and then you meet them. This is a little bit different in Germany, where you first build up before sharing a meal, you build up some kind of relationship, basically, and here it's different. So this is one of the cultural differences.
Yeah.
So,
and one more thing I would like to add is, and I think that's highly important, especially for German people, is a complete transparency over how you handle data. Like, don't try to kind of chit chat or go into a gray zone or kind of think that you can trick German people, because we're so smart here about data and we take privacy and all that kind of topics so seriously, that the better you are, the more transparent the more transparent you are, the more trust you will gain from those people. And if you have maybe even a landing page where you show how you handle that data, maybe even a video where someone explains it specifically, that will really win hearts here in Germany.
Yeah, we have done a review of many German websites, even especially the bigger ones, like the big tech startups that are in Germany. And most of them actually have what you say, this kind of landing page where they only talk about the different certifications they have on ISO, GDPR, how they handle data. And it's something that we always recommend, which is not always understood because it's not so complicated to do. You just have to build a page and, add the text. It's not that complicated, but it's really something that is important for the German market. Yeah. So this is really interesting to have this special localized information from you and those tips on how to prepare, especially for the Mittelstand, which is a big target group. Is there maybe a last tip that you can give on the Mittelstand, how to reach them and how to really, because there are so many of them, people talk from 5,000 to 25,000 companies depending on the size that you see, and it's something that we do not have so much in France, this really big strong group of SMBs. How do you reach them best?
I think we've talked about many great things already. One thing that we haven't mentioned, I think, is they love personal interactions and offline events. So if you have the chance to create local events, small, medium-sized or big, any size, and kind of meet them there offline, not only on LinkedIn or digital channels, I think that will give you a huge advantage. And I think that's something that you should highly consider in your go-to-market strategy and playbook, especially when trying to win German companies. And there's a lot of conferences in Germany that are kind of where a lot of these Mittelstand companies actually go to. So you won't find many startups usually on those conferences. So if you can pick and choose the conferences for your industry and you start there with maybe buying a booth or just going there to talk and understand them first, I think that will give you a lot of value.
Or creating your own events, like some dinner events or lunch events, or maybe with a partner doing a roadshow in different locations to basically
100%.
invite prospects in. Okay. So many great content. Thank you, Tim. We've completely, again, stretched the time that we had, but I think it was very valuable advice from you. So thank you very much. So tell me, what is the exact use case where people should call Tim to launch the German market? What would be the best use case for you? What kind of company should come and talk to you when they want to conquer the German market?
Yeah. So we usually work with B2B SaaS and tech scale-ups that are mostly past Series A, but usually past Series B, and really are in the deep growth phase. And I think you should. I mean, of course, anytime where you want to go into the German market, it makes sense to contact us, either just for consultancy, and we will also tell you when it's a little bit too early, if you still need to do more due diligence or research on the market, or kind of, adjust your legal topics first. But once you've done this and you want to localize your creative strategy and create a completely new creative strategy for the German-speaking market, for DACH, I think that's exactly the moment where we come in and we can really craft all with all of our experience and insight of the German market, your ideal creative strategy and strategic narrative, also the story that you want to then distribute on all digital channels.
Okay, and you have done it so many times before, and again, the leading agency for those kind of use cases in Germany. So thank you very much, Tim. I was really looking forward to doing this podcast, and I think we've done a good job and given a lot of good advice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Great questions, and yeah, very excited to seeing some comments, maybe some further questions from listeners. And of course, everybody's also welcome to message me on LinkedIn anytime.
Yes, and check out your own podcast, the Revenue Marketing podcast. Thank you,
Yes.
Tim. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Go to Germany Stories. I hope you enjoyed today's insights and found them very valuable for your own journey. If you have any questions, stories to share, or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with others who might benefit. Until next time, keep pushing forward and making your mark, whether you're already in Germany